Wow. So I'm not sure if I can live up to those 3 introductions. I want to say right off the bat, thank you so much for exaggerating how good I am. I really appreciate that. And Edith, thank you. Look, what I want to do is take as many questions as I can from you. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time telling you about who I am and why I'm running for president. But what I'd really like to do is to hear from you what's on your mind. And I would like to say thank you to Bishop Crump for taking us in here. Thank you so much, sir. And, you know, I do think it is especially powerful to be here in the house of the Lord talking about right and wrong in our society. So thank you so much. And I do, all kidding aside, thank you so much for those extremely warm and kind descriptions of who I am. Seriously. I also want to say that one of the great pleasures of today is that I got a chance unexpectedly to meet Jonathan Metcalf's family. Surprising, out of the blue, that I didn't know I was going to get, and I've known Jonathan for a long time, but this is the best argument for Jonathan Metcalf I've ever seen. So thank you so much. Look, I know people describe me as a rich person, and that is not how I think of myself at all. You know, my mom taught in the New York public schools, and when she retired as a school teacher, she went and taught prisoners in the Brooklyn House of Detention. And my dad was the first generation in his family to go to college. My grandfather was a plumber, and my father graduated from college at the age of 18, went to law school, left the law to go into the Navy in World War II because he thought when your country asks, you have to show up in the real time. And then because he was a lawyer after the war, as a naval officer, he was one of the people who prosecuted the Nazi war criminals at the Nuremberg trials. And he told me and my 2 older brothers when we were growing up that when you see something that's wrong in your society, if you see something evil in your society, then you make sure you fight it early and as hard as you can, because if you don't, then it takes over and you get something like what happened in Nazi Germany. That's why I started the Need to Impeach movement. Something wrong. Something wrong at the heart of American society in a deep way, and trying to get 8.5 million people sign that petition. And they also wrote and called and emailed their Congress people to say, do the right thing. This is not about the next midterm election. This isn't about Democrats and Republicans. This is about right and wrong. Do the right thing. And they really dragged Washington, D.C. into doing the right thing, 8.5 million people. And obviously the Republicans buried the evidence, did a obvious cover-up. I mean, ask yourself the last time you saw a trial where there were no witnesses allowed at the trial. That's ridiculous. Ask yourself where the jury, which is the senator, says before the trial starts, we're voting to acquit and we don't care about the evidence. You know, something happened at that trial that was really wrong. And it's a continuation of their behavior for decades at this point. And so when we think about what's going on, I keep saying to everybody, this is a straight up fight. They are doing things, in my mind, and I must say that being here in South Carolina, I see it very clearly, that to my mind are unconscionable. You know, the idea that you would cut taxes for rich people and big corporations and then balance the budget by taking away health care and retirement from Americans is immoral. It's not like a mistake. That goes way beyond a difference in policy. That goes to a difference in values and how you feel about human beings and your fellow citizens. That's where we are. And so, let me say this. So I built a business. I did not inherit any money. I did not inherit a dime from my parents. I started a business. I built a business. I turned it from nothing into a multi-billion-dollar international business. I walked away from it. I took the giving pledge to give the bulk of my money to good causes while I'm alive. And I've spent the last 10 years putting together coalitions of Americans to fight unchecked corporate power. Basically, to take on corporations with the help and, alliance of normal American citizens, exactly like the people in this room. And we've never lost. We have never lost, and we never will lose. They're not that smart. We're smarter. They're rich, and they're ruthless, but there are more of us. We have the truth on our side, and we're smarter. That's the truth. So let me say, the first fight I took on was in California, my home state, against 2 oil companies that were trying to repeal the most progressive energy laws in the world, which is California state energy laws. And the reason I got the job to lead the coalition was because no one else was stupid enough to take the job. It was literally like an anti-IQ test. If you're stupid enough to take it, it's yours. We got 70% of the vote. By the time it was over, one of the presidents of those oil companies said to one of my friends, I had no idea that Tom Steyer was so mean. I was like, right on. That is one of the greatest compliments, because look, we've never lost. We took on the tobacco companies and made them pay $3 to $4 billion a year into Medi-Cal, which is health care for the lowest income Californians. They had won 17 times in a row. And we beat them easily. We've beat drug companies, we've beat utilities. I worked against the Keystone Pipeline. I stopped. That was a terrible idea. So I also started one of the biggest grassroots organizations in the United States. It's called Next Gen America. It's basically dedicated to registration, engagement, and turnout. In 2018, we did the biggest youth voter mobilization in American history. I'm looking at some boomers, but let me say, young people are the most numerous generation in American history, bigger than the boomers, most diverse generation in American history, by far the most progressive Americans. Voting at half the rate of other American citizens. So if we're going to have a representative democracy, young people have to show up. And Jeremiah Chapman was running the specific part of this. Where's Jeremiah? Somewhere around here. He was running this is a very diverse generation, but we had a specific part aimed at African American youth called Black Lives Rising, to make sure that we were on the HBCUs, to make sure that we were organizing specifically black youth. So we went into 38 Republican congressional districts in 2018. We more than doubled the turnout of young people. 33 of the 38 flipped to Democratic. That's what we need to do. So, and that's what that's what I believe in. I don't believe in trying to convince people who love Donald Trump not to love Donald Trump. I don't believe in it. I don't have the time in my life to get it done, and I'm not sure if I had all the time, I could get it done. What I believe is there are tens of millions of Americans who don't believe the system works, don't believe anyone tells the truth, think that corporations have bought the government, and don't vote because they think it's a failed system. And they're all Democrats. So we don't have to convince them that what's going on is wrong. They deeply believe it's wrong. We have to convince them that voting matters. That if we show up and change who's here, everything gets better in the real world for them. It's true. And so that's what we do at NextGen. In 2016, NextGen registered 1.3 million people. Might be the biggest voter registration drive ever. And we have partners, NextGen partners with labor unions, and in the last 2 election cycles together, we've knocked on more than 25 million doors. We are a grassroots turnout machine. So let me say this. I'm going to try and move through this quickly. I'm a climate person. I believe we have to deal with climate immediately. I would declare a state of emergency on day one. But the way I've always done climate and the way that I will do climate, start with environmental justice. Start with black and brown communities where people can't breathe without getting asthma. And if you turn on the tap water and mix up some lemonade, you'll get sick. You start in those communities. You start with leadership from those communities. You get your climate policy right. You have the moral authority to actually go forward, and you actually get done what you need to get done. That's people always say, how do you guys beat these oil companies? And the answer is, we don't do it the way you guys do it. We start with environmental justice, and the second thing we do is we talk about jobs. My climate plan will create over 4.5 million good-paying union jobs because we have to rebuild the United States of America. And so this isn't like this is going to be bad, but we have to do it. It's we have to do it, and it's going to be great. And so let me say, in this audience tonight is one of the leading environmentalists in the United States of America, who is from South Carolina, Harold Mitchell. Actually, if you want to know who has actually thought about this most deeply, the people who I trust are the people in the environmental justice movement, like Harold, like the people from California where I know there's a guy named Eduardo Garcia, represents the poorest legislative district in California. It literally qualifies for Doctors Without Borders. He is an environmental justice advocate who understands climate, jobs, clean air, clean water. That's why Harold's so great. That's why Eduardo's so great. That's actually the crew that I trust on a policy level and on a political level. So just so you know, when I talk climate, I'm talking race. Straight up, because if you don't, you're not actually telling the truth about what's going on in the United States of America. And by the way, it's not going to work. So let me talk about race for 1 sec. In every policy area in the United States, there's an unspoken, substantial, important aspect of race that people don't talk about. And it doesn't, I'm saying climate, I start with race. Most people think climate is about science. I mean, they don't even think it's about people. But if you go through the different policy areas in the United States, I mean, just think of one. Education. Yeah, huge racial issue in education. Housing. Huge racial issue in housing. Look, banks deliberately for decades refused to lend money for mortgages to black people. They literally redlined an area, and I've gone back and looked at it, and they do not lend inside this area. How are you going to discuss housing unless you talk the truth about what has happened and how we got here? Housing is the basic engine of family prosperity in the United States. If you can't be part of that engine, you can't save money and make money. One of the things you guys should know, my wife and I started a community bank 15 years ago. And that community bank is dedicated to the ideas of economic justice, environmental sustainability, and supporting businesses owned by women, black people, and Latinos. Because we're saying this system has been unfair and corrupt, and we can show that going where they won't go, we will go. And we will measure every loan based on the impact on the community. And so we can, we have supported over 8,500 affordable housing units in the last 3 years. We measure how many jobs does it create in the community, how many people does it support who otherwise couldn't get support. So one of the things didn't do that to run for president. I ran because George W. Bush got reelected for president, and we're like, oh my gosh, that means we live in an unjust country. What do we do? That bank had zero money in it. I mean, we had to get you have to get a license to start a bank. It has over $1 billion in it. We measure every single loan on impact. We can never get that money back. We set it up so it's basically gone forever. So no one would think we're lending money for affordable housing so we can make money for ourselves. We can never get the money back. And all we get to do is make more loans or give the money away. So my point is, this is where we are in the United States of America. On housing, you can't talk about without talking about race. Education. So how are we going to deal with this in actuality? I was on the debate stage. I don't know if you guys decided to torture yourself by watching the presidential debate. I can only question whether your sanity if you say yes to that. But yeah, but literally 2/3 of the way through the thing, I was like, no one has even mentioned the word race in this thing. Are you kidding me? Are you aware we have this really diverse party with a huge racial undertone to our society? No one's even brought this up in the Democratic debate. I couldn't believe it. That's why I was going like, are you kidding me? Look, my opinion about this is policy comes out of narrative. That if you're going to do something unfair, tell a lie about the people before you do it. And that's how it actually works. I mean, and the example I'd use is, if you want to torture Latino kids, tell people that Latinos are rapists and murderers. Before you torture their kids and separate them from their parents, you gotta tell the lie first, and that justifies your cruelty. Okay, so if we're gonna deal with race in America, we gotta retell the story truthfully. Because you tell the true story, you get the just policy. So my whole thing has been formal commission on race on day one. Tell the story of the last 400 years truthfully. Not just about Jim Crow, slavery, legal discrimination, cruelty, and injustice. That's definitely a huge part of it. Also contribution. What African Americans have done for over 400 years to contribute to this society. Not just build the country. Yeah, build the country, fine. The moral leadership for the whole country that's come out of the African American community, not for years, not for decades, not starting with Dr. King, but for generations and centuries. That story has to be told. Because when that story is told, then we have to start talking about how are we going to repair the damage that's been done by all of the cruelty, injustice, and legalized discrimination. And that's why I say, I'm the only person running who says, I'm for reparations. Something really bad happened. Let's tell that story and admit it and talk about how we repair it so we move on together. If we don't do that, how do we move on? How do we become the just society we want to be? Okay. I'm going to try and get to questions as fast as possible. 2 more things. Economics. Trump's running. We got to beat him. We got to beat him. Edith's not kidding. He's got to go. Okay, I think we've agreed on that. We've even chanted it. He's running on the economy. He is running on the following platform. I'm a criminal, and you know it. You guys know that. I'm a racist. I'm down with that. You know that. I hate 80% of you, and you hate me. You're going to vote for me because I'm good for the economy, and the Democrats don't know anything about economics or job creation. You may hate me, but you got to vote for me because otherwise they're going to destroy jobs, and that's his campaign. Literally. He's not hiding who he is. He's flaunting who he is. He's not. He's just saying you can't. When an impeachment, he's like, you can't impeach me. The economy will crumble. Okay. He's a big liar. He's lying about this too. We have to realize that to beat Trump, we have to beat him on the economy. We have to be able to go onto the debate stage and every time he opens his mouth, go, that's a lie. No, Donnie, that's a lie. We have to do it. If we can't do that, we can't win. Because Americans are good. Look, we know before 2016, everything I just said about being a criminal and a bad man and hating people and being a racist and hating women, that was all out. Everybody knew that in 2016. I can do that. Look, I did build a business. That business was dependent on me understanding job creation, prosperity, and growth. I have no problem whatsoever saying on the debate side, Donnie, you're lying again. No, Don, that's a lie. And otherwise he's going to get away with it. And you have to have the experience and expertise to feel comfortable saying, go as far as you want, man. I'll go further than you'll go. Because you don't know what look, this is a guy who's a fake business person. He was a business person on a reality TV show. That is not reality. That's a reality TV show. In reality, he went bust on a series of casinos, which is almost impossible to do. I mean, think about if you're running the game and you go bust. How do you do that? It's hard to do. So that's economics. I also want to say this. We're here at least partially to talk about education. And there's no way that we can talk about education without saying that every single thing that Republicans think about education, I disagree with. So first of all, Republicans like to cut, the first thing they always do, Trump, Reagan, the people in South Carolina, the first thing they do is cut taxes on rich people and big corporations. And then they pay for it by cutting K through 12 and higher ed. That's their move. They think that the money we spend on education is a cost to corporations. And I think that the money we spend on education is the best investment we can possibly make in the people of the United States. And it's a completely different way of thinking. I don't think, look, it's not just that Trump does bad things, which he does. He doesn't do good things. If you really want to have a prosperous country, you need to have productive citizens. It's like, duh, Don, hello. The idea that you would cut education spending as a way to be more prosperous is insane. And so when we think about it, future prosperity is dependent on educating young people. But it's not just that. Mobility is dependent on educating young people. If we don't give people a chance across the income spectrum and across racial lines, then we are legislating inequality for the next generation, period. This is a moral question as well as an economic question for the United States' future. The number one measure of success in our society, the thing that determines success more than any other statistic, is third grade reading comprehension. So if that's true, if that determines success, then what's it worth to do what this church does here, which is do education starting with 2-year-olds for every kid? What could be more significant and impactful than that? So everything that I think about education is based on the idea that this is the greatest investment we can make in our future, both in terms of economics and justice. So I'm for universal pre-K, because if you believe that where you are in third grade puts you on a different path, then getting people onto the right path by third grade is worth almost anything. So universal pre-K is like a gimme. Like if you believe what I believe, you have to do that. And we're a country that spends more than 10 times as much on defense at the federal level as we do on education. We spend over $700 billion on defense. We spend $70 billion on education. The defense budget under Mr. Trump has gone up by over $100 billion. It's gone up by more than the entire education budget. That is, I mean, think about what that defense budget has brought us in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm not sure. Nothing good. So all the things that I could do to support teachers in being successful in terms of helping kids, I would do. Everything. So that's, with teacher salaries. Okay, check. But it's really how we think about teachers. If you think that teachers are the people controlling the future success and justice of the country, then you have to think they have a really important job, and you should treat them that way. But that's money, it's support, It's professional, on-the-job training as you go forward. It is having nurses and mental health specialists and librarians in the schools. It's getting rid of their student debt if they stay in the job for 10 years. It's a completely different way. There's a thing in the federal government that's called Title I. I don't know how many of you guys know what Title I is. I would more than triple Title I. Title I is a way of saying, make it fair for the kids across all the different lines. I would more than triple Title I because the whole point is, if it's about justice and economics, then let's deal with it. Let's actually confront it and try and put organization, money, and effort behind the idea of giving every kid a chance to go as far as their ambition, talent, and hard work will take them. That's the American dream. If we can't do that, then there is no American dream. If kids don't get that chance, then there is no American dream. Then we really are a banana republic. Set up for rich people, run for rich people, at the expense of working people across this country, which is where we are, by the way. That is exactly where we are. Okay, I'm going to shut up. I said I was going to take questions. I could do this for a long time. There's a lot more stuff I can talk about, but I'd much rather take your questions. So I hope we have somebody with a microphone to bring it around, and I will answer any question you have. You okay, Craig?
Oh,
and please say your name.
Yes, he just told me that. I'm Standrick Rhodes. I'm one of South Carolina's finest educators. No, I'm kidding.
Woo! Woo!
I actually work in a Title I school here in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I just wanted to know, what is your position on assessment and accountability measures for children and teachers and schools alike? And that may be answered in 3 different answers, but the measure that it takes. And I get wanting to increase our pay, thank you. But I know that with that comes some type of accountability measure. What's your position on that?
So let me say this. I believe that the education systems that do the best have a broad goal for what they're trying to turn out. So as opposed to a narrow goal of teaching to the test, I think that's a big mistake. The ones that I believe work set up a broad strategic goal of what they're trying to accomplish in society, and they make every decision based on reaching that goal. So is it necessary to actually do some measures? Sure it is. But if you do a narrow measure of teaching to the SAT, then you're going to have huge problems. And so from my standpoint, I believe that this is going to work by going through the teachers. That in fact, the way this is going to work is by actually collaborating with teachers to figure out what we're trying to accomplish together, and then having every decision about compensation, teaching patterns, size of classroom, support, go towards that. And so, to me, it's a question of narrow versus broad goals. And I'm a gigantic believer in broad goals. Just so you know.
Hi.
Hey.
My name's Lee Potter.
Hey, Lee.
My mother was a teacher. My sister was a teacher, and both of my daughters are amazing teachers. In 1975, federal government mandated special education. At the same time, they came up with some guidelines for funding that. And they have, in the 45 years that mandate's been in place, they've only funded it about 25% of their own guidelines. In the state of South Carolina, that amounts to $290 million shortfall. It's $250 million that could be going towards a million other things. What are your thoughts?
So it's called the Individuals with Disability Education Act is what you're referring to. It's funded, it's supposed to be funded 40% by the federal government. It's never been funded 40% by the federal government. It's funded, exactly as Lee said, about 13% by the federal government. So we would be, I would do 40%. And my answer is $290 million. It's a lot of money. But not in the richest country in the world. And not in a country that spends $700 billion on defense and trillions of dollars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I was saying beforehand that I got a chance to go on a $12 billion brand new destroyer ship out of San Diego. And I told the captain, you know, in my next life, I want to run this ship. This is the best toy I've ever seen in my whole life. This is beyond fun. It's also beyond useless. When is the last time we had to ship battle for the U.S. Navy? I'm going with 1943, which was a hell of a battle. No. Do we have enough money for this? Heck yes. Do we have to prioritize the needs of kids with disabilities? Yeah, we do. This is a question of, everyone has a good education plan in the Democratic Party. Everybody, you know, you're asking about what we do. Everybody wants to raise teacher pay. Everybody wants to do this and do that. In most of this stuff, it's a question about, okay, where's it fall in your priorities? Because are you willing not to have the $12 billion destroyer? Are you willing to think about maybe we're not going to spend 700, you know, we spend more than $290 million on military bands. Did you know that? Yes. Okay, I'm just saying, we spend more than the amount of money it would take to fully fund the Individuals with Disability Education Act in South Carolina on military bands. So I'm just saying, can we afford it? Oh my God. The question is, can we afford not to do it? And that's the question I keep asking about all this stuff, is like, can we afford not to be a well-educated country in the 21st century? I'd say no. Can the people of the United States succeed as a people unless we do the right thing? I don't think so. So my answer is, would I fully fund it? Yes. Do I have completely different budgetary priorities that I'm willing to say? Yes, I do. And I'll fight for them.
Hi, my name is Sherry East. I'm a high school science teacher here in Rock Hill. I've taught 27 years in South Carolina. I'm currently, thank you. I'm currently serving as the South Carolina Education Association president in Columbia, fighting for
Wow.
Our teachers. So my question to you is your charter school policy and taking money from our pot for ESAs or scholarships for vouchers to send our public dollars into private or religious schools, which is currently in our state legislature right now. It's called ESAs, and
So let me be clear. I am completely against vouchers. I'm completely against taking public dollars. I mean, I could give you a million reasons on this. Some of them are pretty incendiary. That is basically an attempt to take public dollars to support schools that was going right back to the segregated schools before it's going back to segregated schools and taking public dollars to do it. So I'm not for that. I'm not within a million miles of that. In terms of charter schools, I believe in public schools. I believe in building the public school system with the teachers in the public school system. That's what I believe in. And I believe that charter schools dilute that effort. If we want choice for schools, let's have choice within public schools. If people want to spend their money, if really rich people want to spend their money supporting schools, and I believe some people do, let's let them adopt some public schools. They want to pour their money in out of the goodness of their heart. They care about kids. I believe they do. Great. Let's make it possible for them to do it within the public school system. And let's make sure that at the center of our answer is teachers. That in fact, who do you think is running these schools anyway? So I'm pretty clear on this, and I'm not equivocal.
Oh boy. I'm Lamont Sessoms. Welcome to the Rock. But
Is it called The Rock?
I have two parts question. I commend the teachers. I went to school, and I've watched every debate. Oh Lord, every single debate, and I'm not under any illusion, so I'm going to be honest. Oh, my question to you is, what do you do with those such as myself that really invested in their education and is in student debt? The reason why I'm saying that, because what I make yearly, my student debt would not get paid until another 30 years.
Yeah.
And so I heard all of the candidates saying they want to wipe out well, not all, but some people want to wipe out. What are you going to do about that? Because like I worked 2 jobs just to pay back my student loan, and
Where'd you go to school?
UNCG down in Greensboro, and that's point 1. Number 2, regarding the economy of jobs, I hear people talk about jobs. Now, my question to you as future president, there's a lot of people that's working 2 or 3 jobs to survive. I am convinced now why. Because of background checks. Because I have had people that have the experience, but because they have made a bad mistake, that they only are qualifying for the minimum wage jobs. So what are we going to do to help those that actually really paid their debt to society to deserve a real chance?
Okay. Student debt, jobs, particularly for previously incarcerated people. Okay, first of all, student debt. My proposal on student debt is 2 years of free community college, 1% interest rate on the debt. The problem that people have with this debt is, let's say you have $30,000 of debt. It's a lot of debt. If you get to pay back $30,000, it's probably manageable. The problem is with the interest rates they have, you're going to be paying back multiples of the $30,000 bucks. Why are we loan sharking kids who are trying to get an education? That's insane. So that is, and the other thing I'd say is this, and I said it with regards to teachers. If you take a job that serves the country or the community, after 10 years, your debt gets wiped out. So if you're at any one of those things, that should make it affordable. The other thing, did I talk about HBCUs? Okay, you guys should know I have a proposal for HBCUs where there is a lot of student debt. They have high tuition because they got 42% of their federal support cut over the last decade. They have low endowments for a whole bunch of reasons. And so they have high tuition. And so kids come out with high student debt because they're paying high tuition. What I've said is, to the HBCUs, the historically black colleges and universities, $125 billion over 10 years. It's a system that's worked, that's an important part of this region, that has been historically the place that black kids get legally to go to college and university, it's important to the communities where they're located, and it's produced over half of the black generals, judges, doctors, engineers, and teachers. It's really worked. So why don't we put money into a system that's really worked, that's important historically and in the future, and really build it and make sure that it works even better and drop down the tuition so people can afford to go to school. Look, I'm someone who thinks education is the key to mobility in our society. And so I'm a huge believer in making it possible for everybody at every stage to get what I got, which is my parents made sure I got a shot at a good education because they thought that's the thing. They didn't leave me a dime, but really. But they said when I was growing up, we're going to make sure you can afford to go to school, to the school you get into. And you're not getting 1 cent after that. So deal with it. But that was our deal, and that's a deal we could, when we think about kids in the United States, they have to feel like, yeah, I'm going to get this shot. And I'll make sure. Second thing first of all, let me say this. A $7.25 minimum wage is an insult to the people of the United States. It is a straight up insult. If you took the minimum wage in 1980 and just inflation adjusted it, so it's not going up, it's just in today's dollars, it would be $11 an hour, not $7.25. 11 bucks. Just the 1980 exact same minimum wage. If you included the increased productivity of American workers, because it's not like we're doing the same work they did in 1980, we're a lot better at it. If you included that, the normal way that Americans have split that, not in the last 40 years, but prior to that, was it went half to the employer and half to the worker. So as people got more productive, their wages, their real wages went up. If you did that on the minimum wage, it would be $22 an hour, not $7.25. I know that 3 times $7.25 is $21.75. The minimum wage is more than 3 times too low. That's what's happened in the United States of America. So first of all, there's the minimum wage question. Secondly, there's a question about people who've been incarcerated and how they're treated and whether they're eligible for good jobs. So let's go back for a second. I said there's almost no policy area in the United States where race isn't an important subtext. And that's certainly true in criminal justice. And it's true in criminal justice from policing to cash bail, which, by the way, I worked to get removed in California. We don't have cash bail anymore in California. To sentencing. Sentencing is unfair, you can show on a racial basis. To how people get treated while they're incarcerated, to how they get treated after they're incarcerated. And so the point is, if you have a racist system from the very beginning, and then it travels with you for your whole life. You didn't actually pay your debt to society. Society is still exacting payment for you when, in fact, you've actually done your time. How could that be fair? Knowing that from the beginning there was a racist aspect to the system that's deep. So in answer to your question, look, I've worked in Florida. We did a lot of work in 2018 electorally to make sure that previously incarcerated people got back their right to vote. But there are a whole bunch of things that previously incarcerated people can't do by law, like live in government housing. There's a whole bunch of things that they don't qualify for, which is not fair if you believe that they've paid their debt and also that the system is inherently racist. So in answer to your question, I would ask, how are we thinking about incarceration in general? What is the point? Is the point to rehabilitate someone and get them back as productive members of society, in which case that's how we should think about what's going on, or is it vengeance? Right? And obviously, we incarcerate people at a rate that is 7 times other advanced countries. And there's a gigantic racial overtone to this. And there's no way to think about incarceration without talking about race. And there's no way to repair this without talking about race and have a different attitude about what we're trying to accomplish. And part of that has to be to give people an actual chance to succeed and another chance at life, including how they're treated while they're incarcerated and how they're treated after they're incarcerated.
We have time for one more question.
Question.
I like to answer questions. They like me to leave. I like to answer questions.
Greg Finnegan from Charlotte. How do we start to bring the federal budget deficit back to balance?
Right.
With times of economically, we should be probably in a surplus at this point, probably. And we're $1 trillion in the hole.
Right. So we are $1 trillion in deficit this year at full employment, and as a result of this huge tax cut for rich people and big corporations. We don't have too little money, we're taking in too little money. So what can we do? Here's what I proposed. I proposed taking back all of the big tax giveaways to rich people and big corporations. Boom. I proposed almost 1.5 years ago, long before I was running for president, a wealth tax. It's like we have redistributed the money in this society from everybody to just the rich people. And it's kind of crazy where we are. We are a banana republic. We should have a wealth tax because A, we need the money, and B, they don't need the money. And it's not right for that. It's really unfair where it is. So the second thing is I'd have a wealth tax. And the third thing is I would treat people's investment income the way I treat the income from people who go to work in the morning. Like, why do you pay a lower rate on your dividends than for somebody who goes to work at 8 o'clock in the morning and works until 5? Why is that fair or sensible? If we do those 3 things, we can pay for all these programs and give a 10% tax cut, which I'm proposing, to every American who makes less than $250,000. You make less than $250,000, We can afford to cut your taxes by 10%, and we will. And solve the deficit. Look, the Republicans are making this statement that's not true. Their basic statement is, there's not enough money for us to have education. There's not enough money for people to get health care. Just go ahead and die. You know, these corporations are so desperate, they need to poison you, okay? They need to, or they'll go out of business. And they can't afford to pay you enough money for you to actually live on. That's their argument. No part of that is true. We are the richest country in the history of the world. We can afford every one of those things, and other advanced countries have all of them. We're the only country that doesn't have health care as a right for everybody. That's crazy. We're the only country that thinks that education of young people is an expense to be minimized. That's crazy. It's okay to poison people for money? Like, if someone was hired to poison you and kill you, and they paid him $1,000, did that suddenly become legal? Because he made $1,000? We can't cut off the $1,000. This is crazy stuff. And that's why, look, I'm somebody who's sitting here going like, I don't want to meet in the middle. I don't want to be Republican light. We're just like Republicans, but a little nicer. We're not like Republicans at all. They are doing something wrong. And it's mean, and it's cruel to Americans. And they have been beating our butts for 40 years. And we have to stop that. Not by saying we're just like them, but by saying what they're doing has got to change, and everybody's got to come vote and change it together. That's the fight in 2020. And let me say one last thing, which is this. Look, I take this really emotionally, just so you know. I view this, I was telling you my dad prosecuted Nazis. This stuff to me is right and wrong. If you really tell me that you want to cut taxes on the richest Americans and have the biggest, Amazon pays 0 taxes, run by the richest man in the whole world, no tax. And because of that, we're going to have to go to seniors and say, I'm sorry, you can't get your meds. I'm sorry, you're going to have to die. It's like, that's immoral. It's not, there's no middle. And, you know, I've been saying, I played sports my whole life. That's what I understand how to relate to people. Being on a team. If you're on a team, you're basically equals. There's no hierarchy. You know, if I play, guard, then someone else plays forward. He or she has to play that position. I have to play my position. We have to trust each other. That's how I like to relate to people, as teammates. And I view this as, it's a fight. And my team is the American people. And the big deal is, you can't let someone run up to your teammate and kick him or her in the face. Can't happen. It cannot happen. And that's what I see in the United States. These guys are basically running down the field and stopping to kick people in the face. Little kids, working people, school-age people, seniors. It's they're talking about taking away Social Security. That's immoral. That is immoral. And what I'm saying is, as a teammate, you can't let it go. There's no middle. And so I'm asking you to support me because I promise you I will treat you like my teammate. That's the relationship I will have. There is no way I will sit and let that happen. Someone was asking me today, what would you do about Social Security, about cutting Social Security? And I said, well, I know that 70% of people who get Social Security, that's their number one source of income. And for over 40%, it's their only source of income. So the answer is, here's when I will let them cut Social Security: over my dead body. That's the answer. And I'm serious. There's something wrong here. We have to have that attitude. You know, you want to take advantage of little kids and prevent them from getting a decent life. Over my dead body. No. That exactly. This is a question of how much are you willing to fight on this? Every way. Without limit. That's how long. That's what the attitude we have to have. Is like, no. Not interested in talking about it, not going to happen. So I'm asking you to support me in that fight.